When we're talking about an avoidant ex, most people immediately jump to tactics. They want to know, what do I say in a text? How do I act if I see them? Should I block them or wait for them to reach out? And while those questions feel urgent, they're not the real issue. The truth is, you will never shift the dynamic with an avoidant until you understand the way their mind works. Because what drives their behavior isn't random, it isn't cruel, and it certainly isn't that they don't care. What drives an avoidant is their wiring, their psychological operating system, and once you grasp that, suddenly their actions make sense. Here's the thing. Avoidant attachment is built on a paradox. On one hand, they long for love, closeness, connection. They want it just like anyone else does. But at the same time, they associate intimacy with loss of independence, with being engulfed, with the fear that they'll be trapped or hurt. So what happens? The closer you get to them, the more their survival instinct screams, retreat. Not because they hate you, not because they're cold, but because closeness activates their deepest fear. If you've ever had an avoidant partner, you know the pattern. When things are light, when there's space, when you're not demanding too much, they can be warm, funny, engaging, even romantic. But the moment you lean in too far, when you ask for reassurance, when you want to define the relationship, when you express too much need, they start to pull away, and then you panic. You chase. You try harder to prove your worth, to hold on to the connection, and all that does is confirm their fear that closeness means losing themselves. It's a cycle that burns out both people. Now, here's why I want you to really understand this. If you don't see this clearly, you'll make their behavior mean something about you. You'll interpret their distance as rejection, their silence as lack of love, their withdrawal as proof that you weren't enough. But it's not about you. It's about their internal blueprint, a survival strategy that likely started in childhood. Maybe they had caregivers who were inconsistent. Maybe they were rewarded for self-reliance and discouraged from showing need. Whatever the root cause, their nervous system learned, if I get too close, I'll get hurt. That's the tape running in the background. Once you understand that, your whole approach changes. Instead of trying to argue with their fear or fight against it, you start moving with it. You stop personalizing their withdrawal. You stop seeing their distance as rejection, and you start seeing it as their way of regulating a system that feels overwhelmed. And when you can do that, when you can meet their avoidance, not with desperation, but with calm understanding, you take back all the power in the relationship. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're holding a butterfly in your hand. If you squeeze it too tightly, you crush it. If you let it go entirely, it flies away. But if you hold your hand open, steady, patient, the butterfly might actually choose to land again and again. That's what it's like with an avoidant. They need to feel like they can breathe, like they can choose connection instead of being trapped in it. And when they feel that freedom, something amazing happens. Their fear of closeness starts to loosen. They begin to see that intimacy doesn't mean losing themselves. It can mean safety. It can mean growth. Now, does this mean you excuse bad behavior? Absolutely not. Understanding the avoidant mindset isn't about tolerating neglect or mistreatment. It's about removing the confusion so you don't waste energy fighting battles that were never about you in the first place. It's about recognizing that the avoidant isn't rejecting your worth. They're running from their own fear. And the moment you stop chasing and start embodying this awareness, you become magnetic because you're no longer feeding the cycle of push and pull. You're stepping outside of it. That's why I say, before you even think about whether they'll come back, you've got to ground yourself in this truth. The avoidant mindset is not your enemy, it's their armor. And the way you influence an avoidant isn't by breaking down that armor with pressure. It's by creating the conditions where they feel safe enough to set it down themselves. So if you're sitting here thinking, Will my avoidant ex ever come back? The first step isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about whether you can detach from the story that their avoidance is rejection, whether you can understand that it's protection, whether you can understand that it's real. And when you hold that truth, not only do you shift the dynamic with them, you start transforming every relationship in your life because you're no longer operating from fear of abandonment. You're operating from clarity and strength. Here's the reflection I want to leave you with. When you understand an avoidant, you stop chasing what's running away. And when you stop chasing, you give them the chance to turn around and see your worth. When I say the power of pulling back, I don't mean playing games. I don't mean disappearing to make someone jealous or withholding affection to punish them. That's manipulation, and it never works in the long run. What I'm talking about is a shift in energy, a realignment of focus, where you step out of the role of pursuer and reclaim your own center. Because with an avoidant, chasing is like quicksand. The more you struggle to hold on, the deeper you sink, and the faster they pull away. Think about how most people respond when an avoidant starts to withdraw. They panic. They start texting more. They want to fix the silence, fill the gap, close the distance. Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? Let's talk. And every one of those moves, while well-intentioned, reinforces the avoidant's fear that closeness equals suffocation. Your pursuit confirms their belief that intimacy will cost them their freedom. So the harder you try to grab on, the faster they'll run. Pulling back flips that entire dynamic. When you stop chasing, you stop feeding their fear, you create space. And that space, instead of confirming suffocation, signals safety. Suddenly, they're not trying to escape you. They're left with the quiet realization of your absence. They feel the contrast between what it's like when you're there and what it's like when you're not. And for the first time, they have the room to miss you. Now, this is where the psychology gets interesting. Human beings are wired to value what we feel we might lose. Psychologists call it the scarcity principle. The less available something feels, the more our brain assigns it importance. When you're constantly present, constantly accessible, constantly trying to hold them close, the avoidant brain doesn't register loss, it registers pressure. But when you pull back, when you remove that constant stream of energy, the scarcity principle activates. Suddenly, they begin to wonder. They notice the silence. They ask themselves, why aren't they chasing me anymore? That curiosity turns into longing, and longing turns into pursuit. Philosophically, you could say, this is about polarity. In every relationship, there's a dance of approach and retreat, give and take. When you're locked in the pattern of chasing, the polarity collapses. You're always leaning in. They're always leaning out. There's no balance, no tension, no space for desire to grow. By pulling back, you restore polarity. You shift from leaning in to standing tall. And that forces them to adjust. Because here's the truth. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you stop filling the space with effort, they feel the emptiness, and the natural instinct is to move toward you to close the gap. Now, this doesn't mean you go cold. Pulling back isn't about shutting down or icing them out. It's about redirecting. Instead of pouring all your energy into holding on to them, you pour it back into yourself. Your goals, your health, your passions, your friendships, you become full again. And here's the paradox. The moment you no longer need them to regulate your sense of worth, that's when they start to feel pulled toward you. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're radiating the one thing they find irresistible, self-sufficiency. There's also a deeper layer here. Pulling back isn't just about strategy. It's about reclaiming your dignity. It's about refusing to beg for attention from someone who is retreating. It's about understanding that love isn't proven by how hard you chase someone who's running away. It's proven by how calmly you can let them go, knowing your value isn't tied to their immediate reaction. That's where the true power lies. Some of you might be thinking, but what if I lose them completely by pulling back? And I get it. That fear feels real. But let me flip that for you. If the only way to keep someone is to chase them endlessly, then you never really had them in the first place. Pulling back doesn't cause the loss. It reveals it. And if they can't meet you in that space, then you've gained clarity. You've freed yourself to be available for a relationship where love isn't a tug of war. This is why the power of pulling back is not just about making an avoidant ex come back. It's about breaking a pattern that keeps you trapped in anxiety and proving to yourself that you can stand in your own strength. Because once you stop chasing, once you stop feeding the cycle, you reclaim your sense of choice. You're no longer at the mercy of their avoidance. You're in control of your own energy. So here's the truth I want to leave you with. The moment you stop running after what's pulling away, you create the conditions for it to return. Pulling back isn't loss. It's the invitation for something real to begin. Reclaiming your value is not about making someone else see what they're missing. It's about remembering what you've forgotten about yourself. Because when you're caught in the storm of an avoidant relationship, it's easy to lose sight of your own worth. You start bending, shrinking, adjusting your behavior just to hold on. You abandon parts of yourself thinking, if I'm just a little less needy, a little more patient, a little quieter, then maybe they'll stay. And slowly, almost without realizing it, you hand over the keys to your self-esteem. The danger in this is that your entire sense of worth gets outsourced to their response. When they're warm, you feel confident. When they're distant, you feel anxious. Their avoidance becomes the thermostat of your value. That's not love, that's captivity. And the fastest way to break free from that prison is to shift your focus away from proving your worth to them and back onto embodying your worth for yourself. Now, I'm not saying this is easy because let's be honest, the human brain is wired for connection. We crave validation, especially from the person we've attached ourselves to. So when an avoidant ex pulls away, your nervous system interprets it as a threat. It screams, do something, fix this. Don't let them slip away. That survival instinct is powerful. But here's where the philosophical shift has to happen. You don't regulate your worth through their approval. You regulate it by anchoring into your own life. What does that look like? Looks like investing in the parts of you that got neglected while you were busy chasing. It's about re-engaging with your career, your passions, your body, your friendships. It's about asking yourself, who was I before I made them the center of my gravity? And then living from that place again. Not as a performance to lure them back, but as an act of reclaiming your identity. Because here's the paradox. When you do that, you actually become magnetic again. The avoidant is not drawn back by your pursuit, but by your independence. They're drawn to your energy when it no longer demands something from them. They see you moving, thriving, glowing without them. And instead of feeling suffocated, they feel intrigued. They feel the pull. And that's when the dynamic begins to shift. Psychologically, this makes perfect sense. We are wired to be attracted to confidence and autonomy. When you're chasing, you're communicating lack. You're saying, my value depends on you. That creates imbalance. And imbalance is never attractive. But when you reclaim your value, when you show up with a steady sense of self, you're communicating abundance. You're saying, I know who I am, whether you choose me or not. And that energy doesn't repel. It draws people in. But beyond the psychology, there's a deeper philosophical truth here. Your value has never been negotiable. It doesn't increase when someone loves you more, and it doesn't decrease when someone loves you less. It is constant. It's intrinsic. The problem is never that you weren't worthy. It's that you forgot to live like you were. So reclaiming your value isn't about revenge or proving a point or making them realize what they lost. It's about stepping back into alignment with who you already are. And when you do that, everything changes. Not just with them, but with the way the world responds to you. People treat you as a mirror of how you treat yourself. If you show up desperate, they sense lack. If you show up grounded, they sense power. And power is attractive. Here's where I want you to challenge yourself. Instead of asking, how can I get them to come back? Flip the question, how can I come back to myself? Because ironically, the more you chase yourself, your passions, your purpose, your joy, the more likely they are to chase you. Not because you manipulated them, but because you broke free of the pattern that was keeping both of you stuck. And let me say this clearly, reclaiming your value does not guarantee they'll come back. What it does guarantee is that you'll stop living like your worth depends on their return. That shift is everything, because once you embody your own value, you win either way. If they come back, they're coming back to someone solid, someone strong, someone who won't collapse into the old cycle. And if they don't, you're not left broken, you're left whole. So here's the reflection I want to leave you with. Stop waiting for someone else to hand you permission slips for your worth. Reclaim it, because the day you no longer need them to see your value is the day they can't help but notice it. One of the biggest misconceptions about avoidance is that they don't want connection. That's not true. They want it desperately. What they don't want is chaos, pressure, or the sense that their autonomy is under threat. And that's where so many people get it wrong. They think if they can just prove their love more loudly, if they can show how much they care, the avoidant will finally relax and open up. But that strategy backfires every time. What actually draws an avoidant closer isn't intensity. It's consistency without clinginess. Let's break that down. Consistency is about stability. It's about showing up in a way that communicates, I'm grounded, I'm steady, and I'm not going to crumble if you take a step back. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional volatility. If they sense you're going to spiral every time they need space, they won't feel safe with you. But if they sense you can handle the distance without falling apart, something shifts inside them. They begin to feel that being close to you isn't a trap. It's a refuge. Clinginess, on the other hand, is what triggers their alarm bells. Clinginess is about making them responsible for your emotions, your sense of worth, your security. And here's the thing. Nobody, avoidant or not, wants to carry that weight. It's too heavy. It suffocates love. When you're consistent without being clingy, you remove that pressure. You create an atmosphere where they can approach you without fear of being consumed. This isn't about playing it cool or pretending you don't care. It's about cultivating genuine emotional regulation. It's about showing that you can love them deeply without making their every move the determinant of your happiness. That's what makes you magnetic to them. Because deep down, what avoidants crave is not someone to chase them, but someone who feels safe enough to let them come closer on their own terms. Think of it like a fire. If you smother a flame with too much oxygen, it blows out. But if you give it steady, consistent fuel, just enough, not too much, it burns brighter. Avoidants operate the same way. If you flood them with demands and reassurances, they shut down. But if you provide consistent warmth without suffocating the flame, they lean toward you, they can relax, they can trust. And here's where the philosophical depth comes in. What you're really practicing when you show consistency without clinginess is detachment from control. You're learning to love without needing to grip, to care without needing to possess. That's the essence of mature love. It's not about ownership. It's about offering stability while respecting freedom. And paradoxically, when you respect freedom, you create the conditions for closeness. Psychologically, this aligns with how attachment systems regulate. The avoidant nervous system is primed to protect against engulfment. When they sense consistency, predictable behavior, no emotional explosions, they begin to rewire that association. They start to learn closeness doesn't equal chaos. This person isn't going to invade me. I can breathe here. And once their system registers safety, they slowly shift from avoidance to approach. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, but isn't that just me tolerating their distance? No, it's you modeling secure behavior. It's you saying, I can give you space without collapsing, and I can hold my ground without chasing. That balance is what creates attraction. Not neediness, not drama, but calm steadiness. Because calm is power. And this isn't just about them. It's about you, too. When you choose consistency without clinginess, you're training your own nervous system. You're teaching yourself that you don't have to react to every wave of distance with panic. You can ride the wave. You can breathe. You can hold your dignity intact. That's growth. That's maturity. And that's exactly the energy that draws people back, avoidant or not. At the deepest level, this is about self-respect. It's about refusing to beg for closeness and instead standing in the quiet confidence that you are enough as you are. It's saying, with your actions, I'm steady, I'm grounded. And I trust that if this is real, you'll meet me here. That trust creates space for them to lean in. And if they don't, then you still win because you stayed in alignment with yourself instead of dissolving into desperation. So here's the reflection I want you to carry. The most irresistible energy you can embody is calm consistency without grasping. Love that doesn't chase, warmth that doesn't suffocate, stability that doesn't cling. Because when you become that, you're not just someone they can love. You're someone they can finally feel safe loving back. If you take everything we've talked about so far and distill it down into one core principle, it comes to this: detach with dignity. That's the one thing that flips the entire dynamic with an avoidant X. It's the pivot point. Because when you can detach, not out of bitterness, not out of spite, not out of some manipulative strategy, but with dignity, you remove the power struggle. You step out of the game entirely. And the moment you do that, everything changes. Now, let's be clear about what detachment is and what it isn't. Detachment is not pretending you don't care. It's not cold indifference, and it's not shutting down your heart to avoid pain. That's just another kind of armor. Detachment with dignity means you still care, but you're not clinging. You can love someone without making their validation the oxygen you breathe. You can miss them without begging. You can want connection without betraying yourself to get it. That's dignity, and for an avoidant, that energy is magnetic. Why? Because it's the one thing they don't expect. Most avoidants anticipate that the minute they pull away, you'll chase. They've seen it before, and in a way, they've come to rely on it. It confirms their worldview: if someone loves me, they'll try to hold on and I'll have to run. But when you don't chase, when you detach with calm dignity, you interrupt that script. You surprise their nervous system. Instead of confirming their fear, you give them a new experience. Love that doesn't demand, presence that doesn't suffocate, care that doesn't collapse into desperation. Detachment with dignity also has a psychological effect on you. It returns the focus to where it belongs, your own life. Instead of living in reaction to their distance, you reclaim your energy. You stop performing emotional gymnastics to hold them close and start building a life that feels full, whether they're in it or not. And that shift doesn't just help you heal, it makes you profoundly attractive. Because nothing is more compelling than a person who is rooted in their own self-sufficiency. Philosophically, you could say this is about freedom. Love without freedom isn't love, it's captivity. When you detach, you're saying, I will not track you and I will not trap myself. I choose love, but I also choose dignity. I release control. That release creates a paradox because when someone feels free to leave, that's when they actually feel the desire to stay. And with an avoidant, that paradox is everything. They don't chase because you trap them. They chase because you release them. This doesn't mean they'll come back overnight. Detachment with dignity isn't a quick fix. It's a way of living. It's the quiet, steady energy that says, I love you, but I don't need you to complete me. I want connection, but I don't need to abandon myself to get it. That's not just attractive, it's rare. And rare is irresistible. Now, I want to be brutally honest here. Detachment with dignity doesn't guarantee an avoidant ex will come back. What it guarantees is that you'll stop betraying yourself in the process. And that, in the end, is the real win. Because even if they never return, you've already returned to yourself. You've broken the cycle of chasing what's running away. You've stepped into your own power. And when you do that, you stop asking, will they come back? And start asking, do I even want them to? That's freedom. Here's what makes this so powerful. When you let go with dignity, you stop negotiating for scraps. You stop bending to be chosen. You stop making your worth conditional on someone else's avoidance. Instead, you stand in quiet confidence and you allow them to come toward you if they choose. And if they don't, you still win because you've chosen yourself. The irony is that's usually the moment they turn around, that's when the avoidant feels the shift because you're no longer chasing. And now they feel the absence. They notice the silence. They start to wonder. They start to miss the stability, the warmth, the presence you once brought. And because you detached without bitterness, the door is still open. That's when the chase begins. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped forcing anything at all. So if you take nothing else from this entire conversation, let it be this. The one thing that makes an avoidant ex chase you isn't pleading, performing, or proving. It's the quiet power of detachment with dignity. Because when you can let go without losing yourself, you stop being the one who's running. And the moment you stop running, you give them the chance to finally turn around. Here's the thought I'll leave you with. Sometimes the most powerful way to win someone back is to show them you don't need to.